Hi everyone and welcome back to the Colour Cave. It's Jem here and today we are starting our next nameplate page chatorial series, but also this is a page that I am participating in with the HK5 project. And if you haven't heard of that, a group of colourists that have YouTube channels got together and they each selected one of Hanna Karlzon's books. By process of a set of live streams, they then assigned a page to everyone that was in the chat, and the idea is that we are all going to colour the pages that we have shouted out for or have been designated, and by the end of July these are going to be compiled in a slideshow, so it's going to look as if Hanna Karlzon's books have been completed cover to cover, and then we have, you know, like a full sort of community project. So naturally when it came to the sort of bidding process, I wanted to get a nameplate page, and that is what we are going to make a start on today because I was lucky enough to get this one in Summer Nights. And I've completely changed my mind about what I want to do with this picture as well. Originally I was going to use soft pastels and do quite a dark background. Some of you have seen my other Hanna Karlzon nameplate pages and I tend to go for a black background. However, recently I was kindly gifted a set of these PanPastels, and there are some lovely colours. So what I'm going to do is like a sort of summer sunset in the PanPastels round the outside, and then have very, very bright and vibrant birds and flowers here, which is just going to pop nicely off the page. So today I'm going to start with the PanPastel background. Sometimes some people do pastels last, some people do them first. Because of the intricacy of this, I'll find it easier to use the pastel first and erase any areas where I've gone over, because some of these are quite fiddly, and then spray it with fixative, and then we can start working with our pencils on the main part of the image. So the colours that I've got today is this very nice pale yellow colour, and this is Hansa Yellow Tint. I also have pink here, which is Permanent Red Tint, and this lovely lilac colour too, which is one of my favourites, and this is Violet Tint. PanPastels are basically, they're a bit like chalk pastels, but they're a bit softer and creamier. I liken them to the texture of, you know, like a cream blusher that women would put on their face. So first of all, what we have to decide is with these three colours, where these colours are going to switch over in the gradient, and it's really easy to get a gradient with pastels of any description. So what I want to do is I want the yellow to be down the bottom and this lilac colour to be at the top, and I want it roughly in thirds, so just by eye, and it's very, very rough. But I'm just going to mark out in a little tiny pencil line, not actually on the page but on this side page here, just so I know roughly where I'm taking them. But I do want it to be in sort of an arc shape as well. So I think about here, and then here, and then the purple will be at the top. But say we can do it by eye, and the great thing about these is they're really, really forgiving. You can erase them, you can rub them out without too much hassle. So the first thing that I've done is I've gone and I have washed my hands, because when I'm doing things like this I tend to like just to use my fingers. So my hands are clean and dry, and all I want to do is take my little finger here and rub it in the palette, and you can see quite a lot of that's come off of my finger. I do have a sheet of paper in behind, and that's just to catch anything that comes off the edge. Now sometimes if the paper moves you can end up transferring over onto the back, but you can erase that really easily, so you know you really don't have to worry too much about stuff like that. And as you guys know, I like an easy route. This should be relaxing, it shouldn't be stressful. So all I'm doing is I'm not putting any pressure on the paper, but I'm just rubbing my finger in little circular motions and just letting that sort of start to rub into the paper. If you press really hard with these early on, sometimes it can give you quite a sort of blotchy finish, so that's what we're trying to avoid. Now obviously I'm going to try and keep away from the line art areas, but again I'm not particularly concerned because this erases really well, especially if you haven't mashed it into the paper with your finger. So this is actually a really relaxing process. I find it very, very relaxing indeed. It's very gentle, it's very gradual. Now the other thing that I do have is I've got a selection of the little PanPastel tools here, and if you do want to go into more intricate areas, they've got these little applicators, and they're just like eyeshadow applicators. And there's also a larger tool as well like this with larger sponge take this out, you actually might be able to see them a bit better, with larger sponge applicators as well. Now, in addition to that, you can get a selection of sponge sizes, and you can see here there's one with a sort of kind of funny sort of half moon shape cut out. So these are called soft, and it's SOFFFT. And these are designed to be used with PanPastels, but makeup sponges work just as well. So I'm going to keep this handy because I might want it to get into some of the nooks and crannies. But for now, I just want to get the bulk of this base colour down, and we can work on the ins and outs in a little while. But the nice thing about these as well is you can cover a substantial area quite quickly. And that's one of the really nice things about it. Now, that colour is still quite vibrant, considering it's such a delicate shade. It's coming up really nicely on this paper. When it comes to where I want to start blending it in, when I have finished applying and I'm about to dip my finger back in, that residual colour, I'm just going to use that, and I'm kind of doing it as a, you know, as like a feathering technique, as you would with a pencil if you were going to colour in pencil, and that will help me to blend into the next colour when we get to that stage. So that's something that seems to work quite well. Now see, we're getting into the kind of fiddly parts here, but this is a-okay. I say it's not a problem. As long as you're not squashing down the tooth of the paper, you know, like mashing your finger into it, that'll erase no problem. So I'm just going to go around here. And I'm not particularly bothered if it's not completely smooth. Again, just thinking about sunlight in general, you know, especially if you've got any kind of shadows or anything around, you can get a sort of mottled or dappled effect. So it's not essential for me to have this absolutely 100%, you know, smooth as a baby's bottom. We don't need to be doing that right now. But you can see how quickly I'm covering this area. And if you are an impatient colourist, or you're simply just pushed for time, which, as we all know, hobbies sometimes get left to the side because life. Now when I get into the crease here, I'm just going to move my sheet of paper over to catch any of the dust that comes off down the bottom here. And as I say, the dust is minimal compared to like a traditional chalk pastel, that you really don't have to worry too much about making as big a mess. And I really fought with myself. I like the malleability of chalk pastel, but I hate the mess, and I just can't seem to get it to, like, I can't control it the same way, whereas I find these PanPastels much easier. Now, they are pretty expensive, that's the downside to them, but one of these pans will last you forever and a day. So I just started with colours that I knew I would use to see if I would like them, and I only bought 2 or 3. My mum bought me a couple as well, which was really nice of her, just to try out. So they are worth having, but I wouldn't be running out and buying a full set, because I think there's some colours that I just wouldn't use, and it wouldn't be cost effective. So what I've got here at the side as well, I've just got a scrap of paper, and it's just for me to wipe my finger on, and I've also got a baby wipe as well, and it's more a case of in case I have like an accidental smudge. Some of you know sometimes I have like involuntary twitches in my hand, and it's resulted in quite a few artistic disasters. So I just like to keep my fingers clean. And I'm just having a look to see if there's anywhere else I want to smooth in a little bit more before I change colours, but I think I'm quite happy with that as it is actually. Okay, that looks pretty good. Wipe my finger again. So now we're going to move on to the pink, and I will show you about the blending situation. So I can move my sheet of paper from underneath now, and if I just come up the side here, and I'm going to pull it out slightly over here, and it's just to catch anything that's going to go slightly astray. Move this up a little bit so that you can see. So same thing again, I'm not doing anything different, but I'm starting with just quite a light tickle on my finger rather than coating my entire finger, and it's so I can start to blend in here. So I'm putting my finger down just above where I've finished off with the yellow. I'm not actually placing it on top of the yellow. And just a tiny little circle like that, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working circular motions down towards that yellow. And I'm not putting any pressure on it, but I'm just going back over it and back over it just to get it to blend in. And you can see how gentle that is, and it's just perfect. It's absolutely perfect. So now I'm going to go back into my pink and carry on the way I did with the yellow and just get round all the areas that I want. Now the nice thing about these as well is you can intensify the colour by going back and putting another layer down over the top of it, and you can get some quite bold colours. When you are working round like you would with soft pastel though, trying not to put your other hand or your other finger in the areas where you've been working, because you can end up with like oily prints in it, you know, like fingerprints. So it's quite important to be wary of that and be careful. I'm just looking at my line over the other side, it's just out the camera shot. You can see my mark here and here. So I'm just trying to sort of line this up. But I want to bring this in a little bit of an arc shape, so I'm going to go like this. And then I'm just going to start to fade that out again. So I'm not putting any more pastel on my finger there. Give it a little blow and that lets me see where I need to move this over a little bit. Just where I need to smooth things out a wee bit. Now the pink really needs to come in here, but that's quite a fiddly little space. So this is where I'm going to take my little applicator. I am going to put a sort of outline round the outside of this design, like round the wreath. I'm probably going to use black Posca. So these sort of intersections I'm not bothered about for the time being, but there's just some little gaps in here that I wanted to make sure that I've got. Right, so quite happy with that side. So now I can move over and do exactly the same on this side. So just a tiny little spot on my finger first of all, and just above the yellow, and then start to work into it. This is a bit of tighter space on this side, so I'm maybe not going to get the same blend, but that's looking okay so far. And then I can just start. Oh, that was a lot of dust there. Oh. Just blow that off. It's a little bit too much. Now don't worry too much about getting into the crease. I always try my best to sort of squish in as much as I can, but if you're using your finger especially, you're perhaps not going to get the, you know, right tight in, but no one's looking at that part anyway, so we don't need to worry. Just bring some of this up. And again, I'm just looking across. If I zoom out slightly, make sure you use a clean finger to do that. I'm just going to try and sort of line this up across where I'm going, so that we get we don't have a lopsided blend when it comes to the joining it into the lilac colour. That's looking really pretty already. I'll just leave it like this. That's it, we're done. So again, once you're happy with that, as I say, it's very forgiving. You can go back and work over the top of it and smooth out any sort of blotchy parts or, you know, anything like that. Right, let's move on to the lilac now. So the same thing again, I'm just moving my sheet of paper. You can use a larger sheet of paper, but you can see where the pastel has gone onto the paper. So it's important to try and keep that away from the underside so that it doesn't smudge all over. But as I said before, you can erase it if you do have any sort of boo-boos. It's absolutely fine. So again, I'm starting above where my pink is, and then I can just work into it like this. And then I can start swishing my purple about, my lilac about, violet, lilac, whatever colour you want to call it. The other thing that you can do as well is if you take a kneaded eraser, once you've finished laying your pastel down, you can sort of dab at it with your kneaded eraser and it will give you a sort of cloud-like pattern, you know, as it lifts some of the pastel. So that looks quite nice as well. If you're looking for something a bit more detailed, then you can certainly do that, and it turns out quite well. I've done that already. There's a patch here that doesn't seem to be taking the pastel very well. I don't know whether maybe I've put a fingerprint on it once before, or so I'm really having to smoosh that in. So I'm going to have to erase over the top of this leaf here, but that's okay. The darker the colour of the pastel, the more obvious your laydown becomes in terms of the evenness of it. It's not as noticeable with the paler colours. So if it's something that you're looking for a bit more of a smoother finish, then you just have to take some time and care and go back over the areas that you know you're wanting to look a bit darker. Oh, this is going everywhere. But see, that's the lovely thing about it. You can take your time and manipulate it, and it's quite willing to work with you. So I'm just going to go gently now down in here and get this blended in with my pink. I was watching some of my my fellow YouTubers. I watch a lot of art channels as well as colouring channels if I'm just doing my own thing, but I've recently started my new 3D pen project, and when I'm doing that I like to watch sort of colouring chat videos, because I'm not really watching what's going on because I'm watching what I'm doing, but I like to listen. And one of the things that I really like, there's a couple of Americans, I'm not going to name them by name, but I absolutely love the way they say pink, because they say pink. And it just, I don't know, it really tickles me and I really like it, because when we say pink, it's like pink. And it sounds very polite when they say it. And I don't know, it's just one of those words that really, really tickles me. And also, there is an art YouTuber, and I love the way she says penguin. It's just the best word ever. So it's funny how things like that just you know, something just tickles you like that, and that's it. Pink. I do think there's some words you say with a Scottish accent and they sound horrendous. Like, Mr. Jem always laughs at me because of the way I say the thing that you would get at McDonald's, because I say burger. And he always walks around going, burger, burger. I'm like, it's not that funny. But he seems to think that's hilarious, so maybe that's his version of pink. And I just want to like have a quick overview and just check if anywhere there's like I'm not happy with or whatever. So I'm quite enjoying the way this is going down on the paper at the top, particularly this purple colour, but there's just a few spots there where it looks a bit bald or bare or pale. But I just feel that the texture of it going down the paper gives that idea of a sky. On this side in particular, I feel that the purple and the pink are too harsh. I just want to try and blend them in a bit more together. So just giving my fingers a wee bit of a clean again. And what I'm going to do is go back to my pink. And just take a little bit. I'm not taking a huge amount there. And I'm just going to rub some of that pink into the purple, just to sort of smooth out that transition a bit more. Now you've got to watch not to overwork this, because if you overwork it, then what happens is you end up with like really muddy colours. You know, it just goes a sort of dull, sort of dirty greyish colour, which is what we don't want. So that's what's starting to happen now. So that tells me that it's blended as much as it's going to blend. But I'm going to bring the pink, I feel as if there's too much yellow, so I'm just going to bring some of the pink down and on top of the yellow. And it's given me an almost sort of peachy colour. I really need to move my... There we go. Make sure I've got the right finger here, this one. Look at that, that's lovely. Yeah, I just feel that the yellow is a bit too blocky. So by mixing these two together, it's given me a nice sort of mid shade. Now when I go to do the other side, I'm actually going to use another finger. It's just because I don't want to contaminate what's already there by making it too pink or too yellow or too orange. It's just trying to get the same, you know, repeat the process that I had done on this side. Okay, there we go. That's looking good. I'm much happier with that. Much, much happier. Okay, so pop these to the side now. Wipe my fingers again. Now there's two erasers I'll use for the cleanup. One is the Derwent battery powered eraser, because it's quick and you can get a reasonable amount of control over the tighter areas. For the teeny weeny spaces, I've got one of these little Tombow Mono Zero erasers, and they're like a retractable pencil. You know, you click them out. And that's pretty tiny, so I'm happy with that. Just before I start, I'm just going to clean them off, just in case there's any graphite or anything on there, because obviously I use them for multiple purposes, and these colours are quite pale, so I don't want any big smudgy dirty marks. Right, that's looking pretty good, and I was rubbing out my pencil lines while I was there. So I can take the Tombow Mono and I can go down the side of the seam of the book here. And I'm not really pressing very hard, and I hope you can see that that has taken off where I've gone over onto the other page. It's taken it off really easily. There is no hassle with that at all. Just make sure I've got all of it. Okay, so you need to work in a sort of reasonably sensible fashion when you're doing this. So I'm going to zoom in a bit so that you can see. And you need to be careful not to put your elbows or your hands in anything that you've done. So I'm going to start up in this top corner here, and I'm going to go with the Derwent first. And the good thing is I can rest my hand in the middle where there's no pastel. And I'm just going to start taking out what's there. Now obviously the more careful you are from the outset, the less hassle you're going to have doing this, you know, the less you'll have to erase. I am not a particularly careful person, so I have a lot to erase. The other thing as well is you need to remember not to brush your pencil dust off, because you're going to go into your pastel. But if you can get over that, then it's pretty straightforward and it's just a case of working your way around. So this is fairly accurate. I'm quite happy with this. I've been really looking forward to doing this page. I really like the nameplate pages in Hanna Karlzon's books. I don't know why, I'm really into them. Right, you can see there I've gone slightly over the line work and I've taken away a tiny bit of the pastel. So I'm just going to take my little sponge applicator and just give it a quick dab into the pastel. And all I've done is put a tiny little bit right on the tip. And then I'm just going to carefully squish that in there, cover up my mistake. There we go. Really simple, really straightforward. And then I can carry on my merry way. I highly recommend these battery erasers. They're not particularly expensive and the batteries do last a while in them, and they're really great for colouring. I actually don't tend to use it when I'm drawing. I prefer a kneaded eraser for that, but when you're doing stuff like this, it's just perfect. Now, a lot of people will colour their picture first and they will then put the pastel down, because the pencil, the oil or the wax in the pencil acts as a kind of resist. And it was Peter Hewitt that I learned that from. But I have found that when you are using pastels, you know, like these very delicate colours here, it's okay, but especially with the likes of Prismacolors, there is a high chance that you're going to smudge something or ruin something. So I prefer just to do what I want to do and fix it down, and then I know that it's fixed, and that's going to be the end of it. Now I'm just going to try and pop a little bit. I'm probably not going to manage this in here without making a mess, but there we go, that wasn't too bad. Oh, ye have little faith. But it's nice, especially with backgrounds. Doing pencil backgrounds can be a bit of a thankless task sometimes, especially if you've got a really large area to cover. And I think it's just fun. I like to kind of mix my mediums up a bit. Much as I like working in pencil, I kind of like the variation that you get. And see, doing that background took me absolutely no time at all. So I don't mind sitting doing stuff like this. But see, you can use the tools, you know, you can use the little sponge applicators right from the get-go, and you wouldn't have to do this, but I tend to do it the other way around. Again, I'm not terribly bothered about the line work, because round this outside edge, as I said earlier, I'm going to go round it with some kind of liner. So most of the actual printed line work is going to be covered up anyway. So it's not imperative that I remove every single, you know, last bit of pastel from the line work. Oh, my flower's taken a bit of a beating there. I do find that the little mono eraser is better for, like, you know, the points of these leaves and things. You just can't quite get that precision with the Derwent. The other thing as well is, because we're going to put fixative over the top of this, even if you don't get every last ounce of pastel, you're still going to be able to colour over the top of it, because you're going to have that layer of fixative. So again, not the end of the world. Please don't agonise over it too much. I've not done too badly down in this bottom corner. I think it's just because they're a bit more solid shaped as well. You know, like the tail's quite a sort of regular shape. I have taken off a little bit of the yellow, and I don't even think you can see it on the camera, but I know that it's there. So I'm just taking one of these kind of pointier sponges, but I'm just going to do it with my hand and just pop a little bit of that back in there. Sort my wee birdies out. Speaking of birdies, that's Pip has moved on. I think because she's had a season now, she's calmed down a little bit, but she's come out a lot of her sort of puppy phase stuff. But she's picking up, you know, new things to play with and new things that excite her. And just now it's the birds in the garden. She wants to chase them, and we have birds that nest with us in the summer months, and they nest up in the eaves of our house at the front. So they're always about in the garden, they're always tweeting and twittering, and they're so noisy, but they're kind of adorable. But Pip sits in the garden and she looks up at them and she just sits and watches them. And if they come down onto the grass, she decides to go and chase after them. And I don't think she's figured out that she's never going to catch them, but it's just a fun game for her, and it's incredibly funny to watch as well. But that's her latest thing. She's fascinated by the birds, which if you're a spectator, it's quite amusing. But I noticed the little birds, like the little sparrows and everything, they're not frightened of her at all. Even if the dogs are out in the garden, the birds will come down onto the lawn and they'll peck away at whatever it is. As long as the dogs don't get too close, they don't bother. And I thought, you're brave little things. But they're so funny. It's obviously a breeding pair this year, and they quite often have their domestics, and they sit on the gutter of the house, and they're cheeping away at each other. But it gets quite animated and quite heated. And I would say to my husband, they're obviously having a bit of a disagreement on something. The wife's obviously having a go. It's really funny. Again, one of the really nice things about living where we live is we do have a lot of wildlife. Some are more welcome than others, to be fair. The little birds they're adorable, and we just let them get on with it. They do. It does, you end up with a lot of bird poop to clean up off the patio slabs, but that's okay. I don't mind doing stuff like that. We have had problem with swallows and house martins, and not this year, but last year and the year before, they kept trying to nest round the house, and they were picking the most inappropriate of places. But I just found it quite odd because our roof comes down quite far, and apparently they like to nest up high. So I don't know why they were trying to do it. But the year before last, they ended up nesting right beside our back door into our garden, which I thought was a really odd place. But we just left them. But they made a terrible, terrible mess, and I couldn't open my lounge window because they'd built their nest up against the window. So when they started nesting, we knocked down the nest, as they were building it. And after a couple of hours, they realised that wasn't the best place to do it. But this year we also have a new shed in our yard at the back, which is like behind our house. And it's a big tall shed, and I think they've gone in there this year. Because we haven't seen them about. But if you go into the yard, they're swooping about everywhere, and they're beautiful to watch. But they've obviously realised that that's a much safer place and a much better idea to make their nest there rather than outside the door of a house where there's dogs and things. I just thought, what an odd choice. I don't know what prompted them to do that. And they did it 2 years in a row. But this year they've obviously learned and thought better of it. Because they do come back to the same spots every year. If they find a safe spot, they do tend to return to the same place. So maybe they thought all their Christmases had come at once when they saw the new shed had gone up. Be like a 5-star hotel for them. Almost halfway. I've got a bit of work to do with this leaf, goodness me. Yeah, you're always going to have more to clean up on the side with the, where the spine is, because it's just a kind of funny spot and a funny angle to try and get into. But say no disasters, really. Obviously, the simpler the design that's on the page, the less time this portion of the work takes. And this is quite intricate in spots, so I quite like this Tombow eraser. I have to admit, it's not something I use very often, but for this it's absolutely perfect. And again, when I bought it, which was probably maybe 2 years ago, it came with a couple of the refills, because these just come out, I say, the same way as a mechanical pencil, they just pull out. So when you run out, it's easy enough just to take out the tiny little bit that's left and pop a new one in. And I still haven't put a refill in this yet. I had my Derwent eraser about 3 months before I bought the little Tombow one, and I think I'm on my fourth refill on that, but I use that a lot more. It's one of these things, they're not essential for colourists, or artists, but they're just nice things to have, and with them being relatively inexpensive, you know, you're not too much of a stretch and you are going to get benefit out of them if you do colour or draw regularly. Again, I find the Tombow quite helpful if I'm working on black paper and I'm working with maybe pastel pencils and normal pastels and white pencil. It's something that I use because again there's a high likelihood of smudginess so they're really handy for doing that as well. Okay, nearly there. Okay, one last little bit to go, just round here. There we go. Oh, I have put a massive smudge in the middle. I must have some, oh, I've got some pastel down my hand, look. Oh no. Eraser to the rescue. Okie dokie, I think that's us this time. Okay, so if I just take a zoom out now. There we go, that's looking nice and fine and dandy. I've got a kind of sort of patchy part up here. I don't know whether to try and, I'm going to try and pop on a little bit more purple up here. I think that's maybe where I lent in it, to be honest. It just looks a bit patchy. That's a little bit better. Right, I'm going to wipe my hand before I stick it in anything else. There we go. Okay, so now that I have finished the actual background, I am going to take the book outside and I'm going to spray the page with this workable fixative. This is the Winsor & Newton Professional and this yellow label one is workable. So it means once you have sprayed what you're doing, you can then colour over the top of it with pencil or use more pastel or whatever. If you're going to use a fixative like this, it is very, very important that you do this outside or in a very, very well ventilated area because this stuff stinks and it is not good for you. And what I'm going to do is the way I would do if I was going to spray paint something. So I'm going to do sort of light scooshes back and forth like this, and I'm going to do that twice. I'm going to go once across the way like this, and then I'm going to go up and down the way like this, and I'm going to leave it to dry for a good half an hour or so outside. It's lovely and warm here today, so it won't take long. Once I've done that, I'm going to give it a second coat, and I'm going to do the same thing again, up and down and then across the way. And I'm not going to do any colouring in it until it's completely dry. Now the reason that I'm putting 2 layers down is pastel is very transferable, and sometimes even if you do have a layer of fixative down, you can still pick some of it up in your hands, and obviously we don't want to ruin our picture. So obviously I'm not going to do this on camera because I'm taking it outside, dogs, and I like my lungs. So that's where we're going to leave this today. I hope you have enjoyed this, and if you haven't seen or used PanPastels before, this gives you an idea of what they are capable of. When we come back in the next video, which is probably going to be a bonus video, we will make a start on our little birdies and get going good and proper with our picture. Thanks very much for watching everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you next time.